The Kawasaki ZX-9R, everyone. Welcome back to another video on this epic motorcycle. Now, if you are familiar with Kawasaki bikes, then you've probably heard of this one, and you've probably also heard of the Z900. They're both motorcycles that have a 900cc inline-4 engine. This bike, of course, is from 1999 though, and the Z900 is a much newer platform. So what are the differences between these two bikes, and why you should buy one over the other? So let's jump on and let's find out. Yeah, it's interesting. The Z900, I think, is one of the only remaining 900cc motorcycles that you can buy now from I think, any manufacturer. Gosh, these gloves are a bit finicky. And so it kind of begs the question, well, which is better between the two? They're both 900cc, they're both 4-stroke, they're both inline 4s. But what are the differences between them? Because they do share a lot in common, in fact. Okay, let's talk some numbers.
Yeah, it's fascinating how even though both of these motorcycles are branded as 900cc bikes, well, there's actually quite a big difference in terms of displacement. The ZX-9R is an 899cc inline 4, whereas the Z900 is a 948cc inline 4. And unfortunately, that doesn't translate into extra performance on the Z900's part. So the ZX-9R produces 143 horsepower at the crank and 101 newton meters of torque, whereas the Z900 produces only 124 horsepower and 99 newton meters of torque. Quite a pitiful showing considering that the ZX-9R's engine is 20 years older at least. The ZX-9R, of course, is a performance-oriented engine, so it does have a higher compression ratio than the Z900, which probably contributes significantly to the maximum horsepower of the ZX-9R. But that's not the only area in which the ZX-9R beats the Z900. Also in weight, you're looking at 202 kilograms wet for the ZX-9R and 212 kilograms wet for the Z900, and that is quite a significant difference. The reason why the Z900 weighs more than the ZX-9 is all because of the frame. The frame on the ZX-9R is an aluminium frame, or aluminum frame if you're in the United States, whereas the Z900 has a steel frame. Another interesting spec for you is the wheelbase. Now, traditionally, Nakeds, you expect them to have a shorter wheelbase to make them a little bit more torquey, a little bit more fun to ride, but actually this isn't the case. The ZX-9R is coming in at 141 centimeters in length, and the Z900 is 145 centimeters, which is quite unexpected if you ask me. One major difference between these two bikes, though, is that the Z900 is fuel injected. Because it's a much newer platform, it might have slightly better throttle response than the ZX-9R. However, even though the ZX-9 is carbureted, it does have this digital throttle response feature, which I wasn't even aware of, that might close the gap in terms of throttle response between these two bikes. But fuel-injected bikes traditionally do have a better throttle response, and that can make a difference in the riding experience. Top speed again is another win for the ZX-9R, coming out at 175 mile an hour flat out, whereas the Z900 tops out at only 155 miles an hour. But of course, top speed doesn't exactly matter all that much when it comes to street use, so let's talk about what does matter: the quarter mile and 0 to 60 times. So according to Motostats, the Z900's 0 to 60 is a very respectable 3.1 seconds, and a quarter mile of 10.89 seconds. That's a pretty good showing, and that's faster than most 600cc sport bikes out there. The ZX-9R, on the other hand, has a quarter mile of 10.3 seconds, and a 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. So actually pretty comparable when you compare the two.
It's like this. And arguably, the Z900 is a performance bike in its own right. Any motorcycle that produces over 100 horsepower is a performance bike. Alright, there's no question about it. Alright, I mean, at that point, when you're looking at more than 100 horsepower, you're smoking the vast majority of cars that are on the road, the vast majority of vehicles that are on the road. You are going to beat them hands down. But yeah, absolutely fascinating that you've got these two platforms that are very, very similar designs, yet one is much faster than the other, or one has got much more horsepower than the other, should I say. That doesn't necessarily mean that the ZX-9R is quicker. I haven't looked at 0 to 60 times or quarter mile times yet. I'll put them up on the screen for you. But I imagine they're going to be quite similar, even though the ZX-9R has got 20, 30 more horsepower almost than the Z900, and not to mention that it is a little bit lighter. So we are going to see a little bit of a difference between the two. And it wouldn't surprise me if the ZX-9R has got a slightly longer wheelbase than the Z900 as well. But the biggest difference between these two is, of course, going to be the ergonomics and the cosmetic design. If you are one of those riders that likes fairing, you like that sport bike look, you like that sporty seating position, then well, the ZX-9R is going to be the one to buy. But having said that, it's not that aggressive. The ZX-9R it is definitely sporty, but it's not too bad. You can sit a little bit more upright. There's not as much weight on your wrists, on your hands. The foot pegs are high, but they're not the highest that I've ridden before. So all in all, a pretty comfortable sport bike in my humble opinion and in my experience. So if comfort is what you're looking for, then honestly, I don't really see much difference between these two bikes in terms of ergonomics, at least in the saddle. I suppose a lot of it might depend on your height, your weight. The Z900 is probably going to be a little bit more comfortable, but honestly, you're not going to see much difference. Although, the seat on the ZX-9 is wonderful. It's a nice cushiony seat, really soft. My butt's really happy in this seat. Whereas a lot of modern Kawasaki bikes these days, they've got like really hard seats. I don't know why Kawasaki have insisted in putting hard seats or harder seats down in their bikes now. I don't know. I don't particularly like them. But it is what it is. But ergonomics wise, there's not going to be too much difference. Woo! Yeah, this bike's fun, man. And this motorcycle produces its top-end horsepower at higher up in the range. Now, I don't know what the rev limit is of the Z900, but it's probably going to be 12,000 RPM. This motorcycle's red line is at 12,000 RPM, and it produces all of its horsepower, I think, at 11,500 RPM. Whereas on the Z900, it's about 9,000 RPM is when you're producing peak horsepower. In terms of design as well, I think that the Z900 looks the part. I think it doesn't look that dated compared to a lot of modern bikes. A lot of modern bikes have got quite a lot of sharp lines, a lot of sharp edges, whereas a lot of these ones, a lot of the lines on the ZX-9 are much more rounded off. And some people prefer that design. I really like it. I like the design of this motorcycle, and I don't think it looks like an old bike. Okay, if you look at it in comparison to a more modern one, then yeah, maybe you'll be able to tell the difference there. But if you just look at it, you wouldn't think this bike was from the 80s. You wouldn't think this bike was from the 90s, which this motorcycle is. I think they stopped manufacturing the Z900 in 2003 from memory, something like that. But yeah, honestly, 900cc is a really good displacement for motorcycles. You've got a nice compromise between weight and performance. 1000cc bikes these days are crazy powerful, but you're paying a premium for those bikes, whereas a lot of the 900cc motorcycles that were available back in the day were cheaper. They still are cheaper to this day. You look at a 929 or a 954 Fireblade from Honda. You look at a Gixxer 750 as well from Suzuki. I mean, 750cc, that's quite a lot of displacement they're missing out on, but still, I mean, those 750s were crazy. They produced a lot of horsepower for the weight, and the weight of the Gixxer 750 was, yeah, better than 900s a lot of the time. So yeah, 900cc is a really nice kind of medium between torque, horsepower, weight. This bike doesn't feel heavy to ride in any way, shape or form, and if you were to do things like track days with it, man, I think you'd have a lot of fun. I'd absolutely love to take this bike on a track day one day, and I hope I can do that at some point this year. We'll have to wait and see what goes on with this bike, because I don't intend to keep it past July, so we'll see. But yeah, In terms of reliability as well, I mean, well, this bike is 36,000 miles. Honestly, this bike should last up to 50k easy in its condition and its age. But there are examples of these bikes that have gone for more than that. So, I mean, I suppose the question you need to ask yourself is, do I want to pay a lot more for a motorcycle that is probably going to be more reliable for me in the short term or even the longer term in the Z900, or do I want to save a buck and get the same, if not more, performance on a sportier bike for less? But he's going to be prone to more maintenance, he's going to be prone to perhaps more issues in the longer term. I don't know, man. This bike has been rock solid. I've had this bike for almost a year now, and I've loved it. I really love this bike. And you haven't got any tech gizmos getting in the way either. That's one of the things that I mention a lot about this bike, is that there's no ABS, there's no traction control, there's no launch control, there's no cruise control, but in a lot of ways you don't need those things. If you want to have a load of fun on two wheels, honestly, this is one of those bikes that really has got to be on your radar, especially if you're looking at 150 horsepower, 170 odd mile an hour top speed, 100 newton meters of torque. Man, that torque is nice. It's honestly, it's something to behold. I absolutely love the torque of this bike. Yeah, there's a lot to offer. This motorcycle is a lot of fun, trust me, and you can throw it around, you can throw it into corners, you can have a lot of fun on this bike doing stupid things. And because it's not as expensive, who cares if you drop it? You know, just put some frame sliders on it and you're done. You really don't have to worry so much about the bike. You don't have to keep it clean all the time, or, you know, squeaky clean. Whereas you're buying a newer bike, you really do want to keep it clean, you want to keep it nice looking, you don't want to drop it, you don't want it to have scratches. But honestly, with one of these older bikes, you can have a lot of fun without the worry. Without the worry. Yeah. It's really interesting though. I mean, the whole reason why I thought of this video idea is because Kawasaki still have a 900cc motorcycle in their roster from new right now. And even though the Z900 took over the Z800, it still doesn't perform the same way that the ZX-9R did, that is 15-20 years older. One thing to mention as well that is different between the Z900 and the ZX-9R is the ZX-9R, because it is a sporty bike, because it was the flagship, it does have a higher compression ratio as well. And that's probably where the extra performance is coming from, is in that higher compression ratio and maybe a slightly higher top end RPM. Yeah, honestly, man, a wicked bike. Having said that, if you're not into the older bikes and you're looking for a motorcycle that's got crazy amounts of performance for relatively cheap as well, the ZX-9Rs aren't that expensive really, then honestly, you can't go wrong with a ZX-9R. It's pretty damn good for the money, if I'm being totally honest with you. And I would take I'd take a Z900. If a ZX-9R wasn't around, I'd take a Z900 without question. Honestly, fantastic bikes, seriously. And I'm actually quite happy that Kawasaki still have a 900cc bike in their roster to this day. No one else does, as far as I'm aware. No one else does. Let me know down in the comment section if there's a motorcycle out there that you can buy from new today that is still a 900cc bike. Yeah, really good platforms. And of course, 900cc has been the engine of choice for quite a long time before the 1000s were around. So it's really refined technology. They've already invested a lot of the R&D. The platforms are tried and tested with a lot of years and a lot of generations on them. So 900cc, really good class of motorcycle. So if it were my money, I'm a bit of a penny pincher. Me, I like a bargain, and I like to get the most bang for my buck possible. If it were me and I had the choice between the two bikes, You know I'd be taking the ZX-9R every time, don't ya? It has so much to offer. We've done videos about why the ZX-9 is such a good bike already, but when you compare it to what a modern day 900cc bike has to offer, it's no wonder these bikes are so good. Seriously, a 24-year-old bike is outperforming a motorcycle from 2024 with the same displacement. Just wow, incredible. What a bike. What a bike this was and still is. The ZX-9R. Anyway, everyone, thank you ever so much for joining me on today's ride. It's been a bit of a dark and gloomy weekend, so I hope you can bear with me on the weather there. I'm hoping the weather's going to be a little bit better next weekend. We'll have to wait and see. But let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Which would you take out of a Z900 or a ZX-9R? Yeah, I'm curious. I'm really curious. So let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Leave a like, get subscribed, and we will catch you all in the next video. Have a good one.